Good afternoon, Assalamu alaikum. This is PTV World. I'm Ahmed Nawaz.
And I'm Rida Shah. Let's take a look at the headlines first.
The National Assembly session is being held in Islamabad today, during which a resolution on the expulsion of French ambassador from the country will be presented in the House.
Federal Cabinet meets in Islamabad with Prime Minister Imran Khan in the chair. Overall political and economic situation of the country discussed.
President Dr. Arif Alvi directs the Federal Insurance Ombudsman to ensure protection of the policyholders' interest. Federal Insurance Ombudsman Dr. Khavar presents a report of the year 2020 to the President.
Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi leaves for Iran after completing a 3-day visit to United Arab Emirates. During the visit to Tehran, the Foreign Minister will hold important bilateral meetings with Iranian leadership.
Coronavirus claims 137 more lives, while more than 5,000 people test positive across the country during the past 24 hours.
Britain imposes its strictest travel curbs on India after explosion of coronavirus cases in the country, hours after Prime Minister Boris Johnson called off a trip to New Delhi.
Pakistan will take on Zimbabwe tomorrow in the first T20 of the 3-match series in Harare. PTV Sports will have the action live. Now for the news in detail. The National Assembly session has begun in Islamabad today, during which a resolution is being presented in the House on the expulsion of the French ambassador from the country. The lower house were earlier scheduled to meet on Thursday. A notification regarding change in schedule of the session was issued by the National Assembly Secretariat.
And the Federal Cabinet met in Islamabad today with Prime Minister Imran Khan in the chair. The Cabinet discussed overall political and economic situation of the country.
President Dr. Arif Alvi has directed Federal Insurance Ombudsman to ensure protection of the policyholders' interests. He was talking to Federal Insurance Ombudsman Dr. Mohammad Khavar Jamil, who called on him in Islamabad and presented report for the year 2020. President said the Federal Insurance Ombudsman should provide immediate justice in cases of maladministration of insurance companies, and in this regard, scope of the institution should be further widened. On the direction of the President, a relief of 2.13 billion rupees was provided to affected insurance policyholders. Despite the coronavirus, 2,183 complaints were addressed during the last year.
Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has left for Iran after completing a 3-day official visit to the United Arab Emirates. During the visit, the Foreign Minister will hold delegation-level talks with Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif on the entire spectrum of bilateral relations. The two sides will discuss regional security situation, including the latest developments in the Afghan peace process and the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. They will also deliberate on strengthening regional cooperation under the umbrella of Economic Cooperation Organization. The Foreign Minister will also hold call on President Dr. Hassan Rouhani and Speaker of the Parliament Mohammad Baghir.
In a video message before departure to Tehran, Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the visit will provide him an opportunity to discuss regional situation with the Iranian leadership. Shah Mahmood Qureshi said, being neighbor of Afghanistan, the Afghan peace process is also important for Iran, just like Pakistan. The foreign minister thanked the Iranian leadership's categorical stance on Kashmir dispute. The foreign minister said the talks with the Iranian leadership will also focus on promoting bilateral cooperation, and said both Pakistan and Iran have supported each other in difficult times, and it will be our endeavor to further strengthen the relationship.
Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has said dialogue between Pakistan and India will only take place if the situation in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir improves. In an interview with Khalij Times, he said Kashmir is not a bilateral rather than an internationally recognized issue, as there are numerous UN Security Council resolutions on it. He said if India and Pakistan want lasting peace in South Asia, they will have to discuss Kashmir issues to find a resolution according to the aspirations of Kashmiri people. Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Pakistan desired a peaceful, democratic and stable Afghanistan, but for that the peace process has to be taken forward by the people of Afghanistan. He said Pakistan is comfortable with the role the UAE can play to improve relations between India and Pakistan.
The coronavirus continues to rage in Pakistan as 137 more succumbed to it in the last 24 hours. More details on this report.
137 deaths due to coronavirus infection were reported in the country during the past 24 hours. According to the stats of the National Command and Operations Centre, 5,445 new positive cases were diagnosed after 68,002 tests conducted in a single day. Punjab, the country's largest province, has reported more than 273,000 infections in the past 24 hours, followed by Sindh with 273,466, whereas Khyber Pakhtunkhwa has more than 107,000 confirmed cases. Islamabad has more than 70,000, Balochistan 21,000, Azad Jammu and Kashmir more than 15,000 and Gilgit-Baltistan more than 5,000. The nationwide death toll has now reached 16,243. The current number of active cases across the country is 83,298, whereas 667,131 patients have so far recovered from the disease in the country. The government and health officials warn that if the ongoing pace of infections continues for another 2 weeks, the situation may get worse. According to the ministry, several district hospitals, over 90% of ventilators and oxygen beds are already occupied.
The number of coronavirus cases across the world have now surpassed 142.6 million, while the pandemic has so far claimed over 3 million lives. More than 121.1 million patients have so far recovered from the disease across the world. The death toll due to coronavirus soared to over 581,000 in the US, more than 375,000 in Brazil, and over 180,000 in India.
Azerbaijan's ambassador to Pakistan, Ali Alizada, called on Naval Chief Admiral Mohammad Amjad Khan Niazi in Islamabad today. The two sides exchanged views on matters of mutual interest, including bilateral defense cooperation and regional security. The Azerbaijan ambassador lauded Pakistan Navy for gathering countries around the world on a single platform through peace exercises.
First Chinese industry laid its foundation in the CPEC Russia-Kai Special Economic Zone and have started their work. Chairman China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Lieutenant General retired Asim Salim Bajwa visited the site along with Chinese Ambassador Nong Rong. In his tweet, Asim Bajwa said the Special Economic Zone is progressing well and all the amenities including power, gas, access road, security wall are being provided as per envisaged timelines.
A delegation comprising senior Buddhist monks from Sri Lanka visited Badshai Mosque at Lahore Fort in Lahore. Speaking on the occasion, Chief Abbot and President Dharma Vijaya Buddhist Vihara, Dr. Valpula Payananda, said every religion gives a message of peace and harmony. He said Pakistan has always helped Sri Lanka in the hour of need. He hoped that the Pakistan government would take further steps to promote religious tourism. The monks delegation is in Pakistan on a week-long religious pilgrimage to various Buddhist heritage sites.
Top stories from around the globe now, where Britain has imposed its strictest travel curbs on India after explosion of coronavirus cases in the country. Hours after Prime Minister Boris Johnson called off a trip to New Delhi. In a statement, Health Secretary Matt Hancock said that India has been added to Britain's red list of countries banning all arrivals from India.
India's daily COVID-19 cases retreated from record levels but stayed above the 200,000 mark for a sixth straight day, with cases increasing by more than 259,000 over the past 24 hours. Health Ministry data showed deaths from COVID-19 rose by a record more than 1,700 to reach a total of more than 180,000. A 6-day lockdown began in the Indian capital, New Delhi, with people still flocking vegetable markets to stock for the next few days. Thousands of migrant workers flocked railway stations and bus stations in the hope to catch a transport home.
An Auckland airport worker has tested positive for COVID-19 a day after New Zealand opened a reciprocal travel bubble with Australia. The case appears to be unrelated to the travel bubble though, and flights with Australia have not been suspended. Thousands of passengers flew between the two nations on Monday for the first time in more than a year. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said the infected person had been cleaning planes from high-risk countries. She said the worker had tested negative on April 12, but on Monday tested positive as part of routine testing.
Chief of the World Health Organization has said the world can bring the global COVID-19 pandemic under control in the coming months, provided it distributes the necessary resources fairly. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus told a news briefing that we have the tools to bring this pandemic under control.
Now I put the motion to the House. The question is that the motion as moved be adopted. All those in favor of the motion may say aye. All those against say no. I think ayes have it and consequently the motion is adopted. Ji, Amjad Khan sahab. Amjad Ali Khan.
स्पीकर साहब मैं करारदाद पेश करना चाहता हूँ बड़ी अहम नोयत की तो उसकी मुझे इजाज़त दी जाए
जी प्लीज
जनाब स्पीकर ये ईवान मुतनाज़ा फ्रांसीसी मैगज़ीन चार्ली हेब्डो की तरफ से 1 सितंबर 2020 को नामूस रसालत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की गुस्ताखी और तौहीन आमेज़ खाकों की इशाअत की पुरज़ोर मज़म्मत करता है। फ्रांसीसी मैगज़ीन की तरफ से पहली बार 2015 में पैगम्बर इस्लाम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के गुस्ताखाना खाके शाया करने पर पूरी दुनिया के मुसलमानों की तरफ से शदीद गम और गुस्से के इज़हार के बावजूद एक बार फिर आलमी सतह पर मजहबी हमआहंगी और अमन को ठेस पहुँचाने की कोशिश की गई है। फ्रांसीसी सदर की तरफ से आज़ादी इज़हार राय की नाम पर करोड़ों मुसलमानों के जज्बात को ठेस पहुँचाने वाले अनासर की हौसला अफजाई इंतहाई अफसोसनाक है। लिहाजा ये ईवान मुतालबा करता है कि फ्रांसीसी सफ़ीर को मुल्क से निकालने के मसले पर बहस की जाए। नंबर 2, तमाम यूरोपीय ममालिक बिलअमूम और फ्रांसीसी बिलखसूस को इस मामले की संगीनी से आगाह किया जाए। नंबर 3, तमाम मुस्लिम ममालिक से मामले पर सैर हासिल बात की जाए और इस मसले को इज्तिमाई तौर पर बैनुल अक़वामी फोरम्स पर उठाया जाए। जनाब स्पीकर ये ईवान इस बात का भी मुतालबा करता है कि बैनुल अक़वामी ताल्लुकात के मामलात रियासत को तय करने चाहिए और कोई फ़र्द गिरोह या जमात इस हवाले से बेजा गैर कानूनी दबाव नहीं डाल सकता। मज़ीद बराह सूबाई हुकूमतें तमाम अजला में एहतजाज के लिए जगह मुख्तस करें ताकि अवाम नास के रोज़मर्रा के मामूलात ज़िंदगी में किसी किस्म की कोई रुकावट ना डाली जाए। जनाब स्पीकर मैं इसके लिए स्पेशल कमेटी भी चाहूँगा क्योंकि ये इंतहाई हिस्सास मामला है तो इसके लिए भी मेरी ये गुजारिश होगी। जनाब स्पीकर साहब
जी अली मोहम्मद खान साहब प्लीज।
Sir, I wish to move under Rule 244B of the Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Business in the National Assembly 2007 that this House authorizes the Speaker, National Assembly, to constitute a special committee to consider the resolution moved in the National Assembly on 20th April 2021 condemning blasphemous caricatures published in a French magazine on 1st September 2020. Comprising members from all the parliamentary parties in proportion of their representation in the National Assembly, the Speaker may make changes in the composition of the committee as and when so required, sir.
Now I put the motion to the House. The question that the motion as moved be adopted. All those in favor say aye. All those that say no. I think ayes have it and consequently a motion adopted. Ji, please. Ji, Shahid Khan sahab. आप बात कर रहे हो नहीं आप अपना लैंग्वेज आप हमेशा जो इस तरह बिहेव करते हैं आपको भी मैं वो काम करूंगा।
That is a session of the National Assembly that is underway in Islamabad at the Parliament House with Speaker National Assembly Asad Kaisar in the chair. The House, of course, is to have a resolution moved, which is, of course, on the expulsion of the French ambassador from the country, a very sensitive issue that is prevailing in the country right now. Member National Assembly Amjad Ali Khan has moved this resolution towards the House. The House has condemned the publishing of blasphemous caricatures that were published in France.
Right, and yesterday Prime Minister Imran Khan also addressed the nation regarding the ongoing situation, and he said that he kind of convinced people to not burn their country in regard to something someone else is doing.
Yes,
in
absolutely,
France.
absolutely. The Prime Minister once again appealed to the public to stay calm, and through dialogue, he said all matters could be resolved. Therefore, the deadlock between the banned proscribed TLP, the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, and the government were reached in this agreement. It had been decided that a two-point agenda would further be implemented. One of them was that a resolution would be moved in the National Assembly which would decide the future and the fate of the French ambassador's expulsion from the country.
Right, and those were live visuals from the National Assembly where the session had begun with Speaker Asad Kaisar in the chair, and the resolution was moved in order to get consensus from the National Assembly about the expulsion of the French ambassador or not.
Now moving on, Chinese President Xi Jinping said the global governance system should be made more equitable and fair, and that rules set by one country cannot be imposed on others. In his keynote speech at the annual Boao Forum for Asia, Xi said rules made by a single country or just a few countries cannot be forcibly applied on others. The world order cannot be led by unilateralism from some country. He said building barriers and pushing for decoupling will harm others and benefit no one.
Two members of the Public Uprising Force were killed and several more wounded in a Taliban attack in Herat province. According to provincial governor, the attack took place in Ghorian district in Herat province following a car bomb explosion close to police headquarters and a Public Uprising Force outpost. He said the security forces targeted the Taliban's explosive-laden vehicle before reaching its target. Taliban also suffered casualties in the clashes.
The jury in the trial of Derek Chauvin, the former police officer accused of killing George Floyd last year, has retired to weigh up its verdict. Security has been ramped up around the court building in the U.S. city of Minneapolis, which is protected by barbed wire, high barriers and armed soldiers from the National Guard. The trial of Chauvin has been described as a pivotal moment for race relations and policing in the United States. Cities across the country are bracing for protests, regardless of whether the jury decides to convict or acquit Chauvin of murder and manslaughter charges.
NASA has successfully flown a small helicopter on Mars. The drone, called Ingenuity, was airborne for less than a minute, but NASA is celebrating what represents the first powered controlled flight by an aircraft on another world. Confirmation came via a satellite at Mars which relayed the chopper's data back to Earth. The space agency is promising more adventurous flights in the days ahead. Ingenuity will be commanded to fly higher and further as engineers seek to test the limits of the technology. The rotorcraft was carried to Mars in the belly of NASA's Perseverance rover, which touched down in Jezero crater on the Red Planet in February.
The United Nations World Food Programme will supply food to school children in Venezuela as the country suffers a humanitarian crisis spurred by an economic collapse. Venezuela's president said his country applauds this step. Humanitarian aid groups in the South American country have long pushed to allow the World Food Programme to distribute food aid in Venezuela.
Thailand is close to completing one of the world's biggest hydro-floating solar hybrid projects on the surface of a dam, part of steps towards boosting renewable energy production after years of criticism for reliance on fossil fuels. Some over 144,000 units of solar panels are being installed on a reservoir in the northeast province of Ubon Ratchathani. Workers are completing the last of 7 solar frames covering 300 acres of water area. Authorities are aiming to complete the project in June. The state-run Electricity Generation Authority of Thailand is touting the pilot project as one of the world's largest hybrid hydro-solar power ventures and aims to replicate it at 8 more dams over the next 16 years.
Mohammad Khan is addressing.
कमेटी में भेज दिया जाए, वो उस पे गौर व खौज करे और यहाँ पे फिर ऐवान में भेज दे, ऐवान फिर इस पे अगर ओपन डिबेट करना चाहे या जो भी करना चाहे, लेकिन अगर जो उनकी रिक्वेस्ट आई है प्राइवेट मेंबर की, अगर उसको कंसिडर कर लिया जाए और ये मोशन जो है वो उसको स्पेशल कमेटी की तरफ इसको भेज दिया जाए।
मैं थोड़ा असद, मौलाना असद, इसके बाद काजी साहब, मौलाना असद साहब प्लीज।
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम नहमदुहु व नसल्ली अला रसूलिहिल करीम अम्मा बअद फ़अऊज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम।
That was the National Assembly session that is underway. The Parliament House in Islamabad with Speaker National Assembly Asad Kaisar in the chair. We'll keep you updated as the House proceedings carry on further.
Now resuming our news bulletin, Pakistan will take on Zimbabwe tomorrow in the first T20 of the three-match series in Harare. PTV Sports will telecast the match live. Pakistan will play 3 T20 internationals and 2 test matches in the tour against Zimbabwe. The second and third T20s will be played on April 23rd and 25th, while first tests start from 29th of April. The second test will be played on 7th of May. Harare will host all the matches.
On the other hand, the Test squad is preparing in Lahore for a Test series in Zimbabwe that follows the T20 internationals. Batting coach Mohammad Yusuf, speaking at the High Performance Centre, said Test players are practicing under an elaborate strategy. Senior players Azhar Ali, Fawad Alam and others say they have had ample time for Zimbabwe Test series and coaches have been very beneficial. The Pakistan-Zimbabwe 2 Test series starts on 29th of April in Harare.
Bowling coach Waqar Younis will not be available during Zimbabwe tour. Waqar Younis has left for Australia while his spouse has been scheduled for a surgery after